Donald Trump stormed onto Stephen Colbert's stage to shut down fake rumors. But seconds later, Stephen Colbert dropped a live on-air revelation, pulling out a verified report that claimed to confirm Barron's real mother, triggering a studio freeze, a public meltdown, and a shocking walkout that left America frozen in shock. The Late Show started like any other night. The band finished the intro, the lights settled into their familiar glow, and the audience relaxed into their seats, ready for jokes and easy laughs. People were scrolling their phones, whispering to friends, waiting for Stephen Colbert to step into his usual rhythm. Then the side door opened. At first, a few people thought it was a staff member or a stage cue gone wrong. But when the figure stepped into the light, the mood in the room snapped in half. Donald Trump walked out onto the stage, not announced, not introduced, just there. The crowd reaction was instant and messy. This wasn't a celebrity cameo. This wasn't part of the show. This was the president showing up uninvited, and everyone in the room knew the rules had just changed. Trump didn't rush. He walked with that familiar slow confidence, waving slightly, letting the moment stretch. Some people clapped, others sat frozen. Trump didn't sit down. He planted himself next to the desk, squared his shoulders, and looked straight into the main camera. "I didn't come here to be entertained," he said sharply. "I came here to shut down lies." The word lies echoed through the studio. A few people clapped, others went completely silent. He pointed vaguely toward the audience and the cameras. "For weeks, the media has been pushing garbage about my family. Fake sources, fake stories. And tonight, I'm not letting it slide." His voice grew louder, more aggressive, feeding off the tension in the room. Then he turned toward Colbert with a tight smile. "And let's be honest, Stephen," he said, dragging out the name. "You're not a journalist. You're a late-night comedian playing politics. You tell jokes, you push narratives, and then you pretend it's just comedy when people call you out." A wave of nervous laughter rolled through the crowd, mixed with boos. Colbert stayed quiet, eyes locked on Trump, not blinking, not interrupting. That silence only pushed Trump further. Trump stepped closer to the desk. "You people love drama," he continued. "You don't care about facts. You care about headlines, you care about ratings, and you're using my name to get both." He shook his head slowly, acting disappointed. "That's the real scam here." Some audience members cheered loudly. Others shouted back in protest. The studio split right down the middle, and the tension became impossible to ignore. He raised his voice again. "So yeah, I'm here to clear rumors," he said, jabbing a finger toward the camera. "Because I'm tired of being attacked by anonymous cowards and talk show hosts who hide behind punchlines." He paused for effect, letting the silence hang. "If anyone thinks they're going to ambush me on my own terms tonight, they picked the wrong person." The crowd reacted instantly. Gasps, claps, whispers all at once. Colbert didn't jump in. He didn't fire back. He didn't defend himself the way everyone expected. Instead, he stayed completely still behind the desk, letting Trump's last words hang in the air like smoke. Then he slowly lifted his eyes and locked them on Trump. Not a hostile stare, not a smile either. Just calm, steady eye contact that refused to break. Trump glanced briefly toward the crowd, then back at Colbert, his jaw tightening. He cleared his throat, waiting for Colbert to speak. But Colbert didn't give him that release. He let the pause stretch again, forcing Trump to sit inside the tension he had created. Colbert finally spoke, and his voice was calm enough to make the moment even heavier. "Mr. President," he said slowly, "let's talk about your relationship with Ivanka." The room didn't just get quiet. It froze. One woman in the front row gasped and covered her mouth. That single sound cut through the silence like a blade. Trump's smile tightened instantly, and for a split second, his eyes flashed with irritation before he forced himself to nod. Trump leaned back and tried to brush it off. "Ivanka and I have a great relationship," he said quickly. "An incredible relationship. People wish they had families as successful as mine. Then he shifted into bragging mode, talking about business, brand deals, and how his family built an empire. He kept going, stacking accomplishments on top of each other, hoping to drown the question in noise. But the audience wasn't buying it. The silence came back, heavier than before. Colbert didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply lifted one finger slightly, stopping Trump mid-flow. "You didn't answer the question, sir," he said flatly. The words landed hard. A ripple of tension moved through the crowd. Trump blinked, clearly not expecting to be cut off like that. His posture stiffened, and his jaw clenched as he searched for another angle. Trump tried again, this time sharper. "I don't need to explain my family to a comedian," he snapped. "That's private." Colbert didn't flinch. He held eye contact and replied calmly, "Then why did you come on live television to clear rumors if you won't address the one people are actually talking about?" That was the moment the balance shifted. Trump shifted in his chair and cleared his throat. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His eyes darted briefly toward the crowd, then back to Colbert. He gave a short, awkward laugh that died instantly. "Look, this is getting ridiculous," he muttered, trying to sound casual. But his voice didn't carry the same confidence anymore. Colbert leaned back slightly and said nothing. That silence was louder than any accusation. It forced Trump to sit inside the tension with nowhere to hide. He adjusted his jacket, tugged at his cuff, tapped his fingers against the armrest. Small movements, but the camera caught all of them. Colbert's voice finally cut through the tension, low and controlled, but sharp enough to shift the room. "You keep saying fake," he said, "so let's stop playing word games." He reached under the desk slowly, deliberately, making sure every camera caught the movement. When he brought his hand back up, a sealed brown envelope rested in his palm. The audience reacted instantly. A collective inhale, followed by stunned silence. Colbert held it up at chest level. "This isn't a rumor. This is documentation," he said. "Verified, logged, reviewed." Trump leaned forward hard. "Put that down," he snapped. "You're embarrassing yourself." Colbert didn't move. "Independent lab verification," he continued calmly, ignoring the interruption. "Third-party handling. Full chain of custody." The words sounded clinical, official, and impossible to brush off. Trump laughed once, loud and forced. "You expect people to believe a talk show prop?" he said. Colbert's eyes stayed locked on him. "If it was a prop, your face wouldn't have changed." Behind the cameras, a producer raised 2 fingers and nodded. "Legal approved." Colbert caught the signal and didn't hesitate. "This report confirms biological records connected to your family narrative," he said, choosing every word carefully. Trump shot up slightly from his seat. "You don't get to do this," he barked. "You're crossing every line." Colbert fired back, still calm but colder now. "No, you crossed the line when you walked in here claiming truth while hiding behind noise." Trump pointed at the envelope. "That's fabricated. That's political garbage." Colbert lifted it higher so the front rows could see the seal. "Then explain why it came with verification stamps and independent review signatures," he said. "Explain why it passed legal screening before I brought it on this desk." The crowd murmured softly, stunned by the precision of the move. Trump opened his mouth to respond, then stopped. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to the audience, then back to Colbert. Just minutes ago, Trump had been pacing, controlling the room with volume and confidence. Now he was seated, tense, reactive, watching an envelope he couldn't talk over. Colbert placed it flat on the desk, resting his hand on top like a final warning. "You wanted to clear rumors," he said quietly. "This is what clearing looks like." Colbert didn't rush. He let the room sit in that heavy silence for a few more seconds, his hand still resting on the envelope like it was anchoring the moment. Then he looked up slowly, eyes steady, voice controlled. "Let me be very clear," he said. "This is not rumor. This is a documented identity." The shift in tone was immediate. It wasn't entertainment anymore. It sounded like a statement meant to land hard and stay there. He slid the envelope open just enough to pull out a single page. He didn't read the full name. He didn't need to. He raised the paper slightly and said, "According to this report, Barron's real mother is not who the public has been told." A ripple of shock moved through the studio. Trump froze for half a second, then his face tightened. Colbert continued, slow and deliberate. "Her name starts with the letter I." The room exploded into stunned silence. No cheers, no clapping, just disbelief. Trump shot up from his chair. "That's insane," he shouted, his voice cracking at the edges. "You're lying. You're making this up on live television." His hands shook slightly as he pointed at Colbert. "This is sick. You're attacking my family for ratings." Colbert didn't flinch. "If it was fake," he replied calmly, "you wouldn't be standing right now. You'd be laughing." That line hit like a punch. Trump tried to speak again, but the words came out uneven. "You don't know what you're doing," he said, swallowing hard. "This will destroy people." His voice dropped for a second, then jumped back up in anger. "I won't allow this." He looked around the studio, searching for support, for noise, for anything to break the moment. But the audience stayed frozen, eyes locked on him. Trump slammed his hand against the armrest and shook his head hard. "This is propaganda," he shouted. "Pure political theater." His voice echoed through the studio, louder than before, but it didn't carry the same authority. "You're spreading lies on national television," he continued, pointing toward the cameras. "And I'll sue everyone involved, the network, the producers, you." He tried to sound dominant, threatening lawsuits like a weapon, hoping fear would pull control back into his hands. Colbert didn't raise his voice. He didn't even change his posture. He simply looked at Trump and said calmly, "Your lawyers already saw this." The room reacted instantly. A low wave of shocked murmurs rolled through the audience. Trump froze mid-gesture. "That's impossible," he snapped. "You're bluffing." Colbert shook his head once. "Pre-screened, cleared, reviewed. That's why this envelope is on this desk." The confidence in his tone wasn't emotional. It was procedural, and that made it dangerous. Trump tried to pivot again. "This is a setup," he said, pacing now, his movements sharper and more frantic. "You planned this. You ambushed me." Colbert responded without hesitation. "No, you walked in here and demanded truth. You just didn't expect it to show up." The audience felt the shift immediately. Trump wasn't steering the conversation anymore. He was chasing it. His voice started to rise again, but the words overlapped and stumbled. "You don't control this narrative," he said, but it sounded less like a statement and more like a plea. Colbert leaned forward slightly. "I don't have to," he replied. "The document does." That line landed harder than any insult. Trump stopped pacing. He stood still, breathing heavier, eyes darting between Colbert, the envelope, and the crowd. Colbert slowly lifted his hand from the desk, signaling without words that he wasn't going to escalate this into a shouting match. He didn't open the envelope any further. He didn't reveal another line. Instead, he looked straight at Trump and said calmly, "We don't need to read the name. The reaction already told the story." The sentence landed with quiet force. It reframed everything. Suddenly, the focus wasn't on the paper anymore. It was on Trump's behavior, his panic, his denial, his loss of control. Trump tried to interrupt, opening his mouth to speak, but Colbert gently raised one finger. Not aggressively, just enough to hold the floor. "You came here to control the story," Colbert said evenly. "But when pressure showed up, you lost control of yourself." The words were simple, but they cut deep. Trump stopped mid-sentence. His shoulders dropped slightly. He didn't push back right away. Colbert placed the envelope back on the desk, flat and untouched, like a sealed verdict. "This doesn't need drama," he added quietly. "It already has consequences." The audience stayed silent, but it wasn't awkward silence anymore. It was understanding. Trump stood up so fast the chair screeched across the studio floor. The sound cut through the silence like metal scraping glass. Every head in the room snapped toward him at once. He didn't look at Colbert anymore. He didn't look at the audience either. His jaw was tight, his face flushed, his breathing heavy. "This is over," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else, grabbing the edge of the desk for a brief second like he needed something solid to hold on to. He turned sharply and walked toward the exit, his steps loud against the studio floor. No applause followed him. No boos either. Just stunned quiet. The camera stayed locked on his back as he reached the side door. When he pushed it open and slammed it shut behind him, the echo bounced across the studio walls and lingered in the air. It sounded final. It sounded deliberate, like punctuation at the end of a sentence no one was ready to hear. The studio froze. Nobody moved. The band didn't play. The crew didn't cut away. Even Colbert stayed still behind the desk, hands resting calmly on the surface, eyes fixed on the empty space Trump had just left behind. The audience sat frozen in their seats, processing what they had just witnessed. This wasn't a polite exit. This wasn't a commercial break walk-off. This was a public collapse of authority, happening live with nowhere to hide. For a few seconds after the door slammed, nobody knew what to do. The audience sat frozen, staring at the empty space beside Colbert's desk like it was still occupied. Some people slowly started clapping in disbelief, while others shook their heads, whispering to each other, trying to process what they had just seen. A few shouted Trump's name, either in anger or support, but their voices quickly faded into awkward silence. The energy in the room was fractured. Half shock, half adrenaline, all confusion. This wasn't the reaction you saw after a comedy bit. This was the reaction after something historic and uncomfortable. Behind the cameras, staff members stood completely still. A floor manager had one hand frozen in the air, unsure whether to cue applause or cut to break. The band didn't move. The stage crew didn't step in. The cameras kept rolling, capturing everything. The stunned faces, the whispered conversations, the nervous shifting in seats. Colbert finally leaned back slightly and exhaled, breaking the tension with just 4 words. "Well, that just happened." The crowd reacted instantly, some laughing in disbelief, others clapping loudly, and a few sitting in silence, still processing the moment. Colbert didn't celebrate. He didn't mock. He simply looked into the camera and added, "This is live television, folks." That line grounded the moment. It reminded everyone watching that nothing about this was edited, scripted, or cleaned up. Within minutes, phones across the studio started vibrating. Audience members were checking social media, eyes widening as clips began spreading in real time. Trump walks out of Late Show shot to the top of trending lists. Another phrase followed closely behind. Envelope mystery. Short clips of Trump standing up, the chair scraping, the door slamming, and Colbert holding the envelope flooded every platform. Comment sections exploded. Supporters called it an ambush. Critics called it a meltdown. Nobody ignored it. Cable news networks cut into programming to replay the footage. Split screens showed Trump's exit on one side and panel discussions on the other. Political commentators immediately picked sides. Some defended Trump's reaction as justified anger. Others said it was the clearest sign yet of emotional collapse under pressure. The phrase live TV humiliation started appearing in headlines. Even late-night hosts across other networks began teasing reactions to the moment before the hour was over. Behind the scenes, Trump's team went into emergency mode. A leaked message from his press staff circulated among reporters, confirming they were preparing a response and reviewing legal options. Another insider hinted that advisors were furious about the unplanned appearance and the lack of control. Damage control was happening in real time. While Colbert sat calmly behind his desk, the political machine on the other side was already spinning at full speed. Colbert looked down at the envelope one last time, then pushed it slightly away from himself. "I'm not going to read the full report tonight," he said calmly. The audience reacted instantly. Confused murmurs, quiet protests, and sharp curiosity all at once. Colbert raised his hand gently. "The public deserves truth," he added, "not chaos." That line stopped the noise. He made it clear this wasn't about shock value anymore. It was about control, timing, and responsibility. Outside the studio, the mystery exploded. Viewers online began guessing what the letter I stood for. Forums lit up. Comment sections filled with theories, screenshots, slow-motion replays of Trump's reaction, and frame-by-frame breakdowns of the envelope moment. Some claimed inside sources. Others demanded Colbert release everything. The unanswered question became more powerful than a full reveal. And that was the hook. The story didn't end on answers. It ended on tension that refused to go away. If you don't want to miss what happens next, including whether that envelope ever gets fully revealed, hit subscribe now, turn on notifications, and stay locked in. Because this story isn't over, and the next chapter could be even bigger.